Our liberty is at stake. Your homes, your families, everything we hold dear is now at stake. We retreated through the jerseys, and I commend you for that orderly retreat, because you saved this army. Several hundred of your comrades lie in a hospital north of here, and we owe it to them to continue on and continue. This army will not dissipate here on the banks of the Delaware. 2 days ago, your sergeants were given a copy of The Crisis by a soldier who traveled with us, Thomas Paine. Your sergeants read you these words, and hopefully they stirred you as they stir me. You've heard these before. These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of their country. But he that stands it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. You, my brave fellows, deserve that thanks, because you are here with us. We've endured many hardships. Lack of food, lack of ammunition, lack of tentage. And my province, Philadelphia, has provided us with blankets, at least to keep some of you warm. But now is the time to strike. We all wish we were home. I wish I was on my estate. But now is the time to strike. As we were chased, now we will do the hunting. We will be the hounds chasing the crown forces and the Hessian mercenaries. It's our turn now to cross this river and take the town of Trenton. Your officers have been advised of what to do. We are going to travel silently and quickly to attack the Trenton outpost. You have your ammunition, you have your skills, you will act as soldiers. And stand by your officers, for God's sake, stand by your officers. Providence will lead the way. And I promise you that every one of your officers will support you. We will be there with you. I will be there alongside you. I praise you for your courage and your fortitude in staying with this army. So I will delay you no longer. Colonel Sergeant, prepare the troops in their point boats. Yes, sir. Brigade! Rest your arm. Firehouse! Shoulder your arm. Firehouse! Rear rank, rear base in front. March! Have a good fox up, my brave boys.
Advance parties landed. It's coming back. Looks like the first boat is loaded and ready to go.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, now they're coming back.
Already?
How much is trips down?
They're coming back.
Yeah. I think maybe they come back if we'll report on Wednesday. I think that's what they're doing.
Excuse me.
Ladies and gentlemen, what you're seeing now on the river, the advance party went across and is returning now. The advance party was done over by General Washington to secure the landing zone for the rest of his army. In the meantime, General Washington is loading the boats and will head across the river. But I'd like to do a couple of things. Think about the day today is unbelievable. The Trenton Times said in 1976 that there were 25,000 people. I think we may be approaching that. This is a huge turnout, and of course I think we give a major thank you to guess who? Mother Nature. Thank you for the weather, thank you for the temperature, thank you for the water, thank you for the wind, but it's all made for a great day. We thank you all for coming and supporting the park. However, let's just think back, 240 some odd years ago, there weren't this many people on the riverbank. Matter of fact, the riverbank was in darkness. It was pitch black. You had between 16 and 18 of these boats taking 2,400 troops across the river. The river was 880 feet across. It was 90 inches deep. And the huge slabs of ice coming down And of course, at midnight, the storm hits. So you're not talking about a walk in the park. This was a courageous, heroic, and quite unique operation. But they did it. And I think it demonstrates the courage, the commitment, the perseverance of not only the colonial soldiers, but also General Washington. I would like to point out that on one of these boats, as they get to midstream, they will toss a wreath into the water. This wreath is in memoriam to Larry Proctor. Larry Proctor was a reenactor in the Marblehead Regiment, who are the rowers on this expedition. He died earlier this month. And as tradition has it, as the Marblehead Mariners or the reenactors pass on, we throw a wreath in the river to testimony to their effort and what have you. And by the way, these reenactors give up an awful lot so that we can recreate the crossing of the Delaware. They give up a lot, but let's face it, I know these guys, and guess what, people? This is their Super Bowl. So what I'm going to ask you to do is let's give a 3 rounds of cheers for the They deserve a huge amount of credit. They work very hard. They have to phase in new people, what have you. Right now, the boats that they're using, of course, are these Durham boats, which were made at the south of eastern Pennsylvania. They were cargo boats carrying stuff down the river to Philadelphia. And of course, they had between 16 and 18 of these boats to get the troops across. That's why it took them from about 6 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the afternoon till about 3 o'clock in the morning to finally get across. This was not, again, as I mentioned, this was not a walk in the park. Now, you've seen on the riverbank some of the officials, Colonel Wilkinson, Colonel Sargent, Colonel Glover, what have you, also General Washington. But also, you're going to realize that 2 future presidents went across the river, General Washington and James Monroe, who became president number 5. Also, we had the first Secretary of War, who was Henry Knox. And Henry Knox managed a crossing. And I don't know how many of you know it, but he was chosen by Washington to manage the crossing because he was huge. He was over 300 pounds, and he had a bullhorn for a voice. And they didn't have any walkie-talkies back in those days, so they needed somebody to be able to handle it. Also, that crossed over was the first Secretary of the Treasury. Any of you know who the first Secretary of Treasury was? If it's Alexander Hamilton, raise your hand. Okay, you're right. So we had 4 future leaders of the United States going across here. But it's interesting, you talk about the age. Now, George Washington was 44 years old when he did this, but most of the guys were quite young. Hamilton and Monroe were in their 20s. These guys were young dudes, but they stepped up to effect this crossing and, of course, change the course of history. And, of course, as any of you who have read history, you'll find that what happened here in 1776 was one of the very few pivotal events in human history. You know, without this, of course, we'd all be talking British, but without this, democracy would have floundered. We'd have been in real deep trouble. But the example that the Americans and colonists fought for was quite enlightened. Matter of fact, the age of enlightenment. I'd like to mention also that each of you had an opportunity when you came in to get a program. Just a little commercial message here. In that program are advertisements from people who support the park and support the creation of the program. We would ask that you keep it and patronize these people because they are huge supporters of the park. The interesting thing is about the history of what took place here. As you may know, Washington had started out after coming down from Boston, and he got whipped up pretty bad in New York, Brooklyn, Harlem Heights, Fort Washington, Fort Lee, and he is pushed out of New Jersey by a superior force of British and Hessians. When he gets here, things are in bad shape. His record on the field is 0 for 5. You're a coach of a major football team, that's not very good. Congress is on his case, morale is in trouble, but he persevered. He got those guys to stick around and join him for this trip to Trenton, which was not a piece of cake either, because once they got over in this nasty storm, they had to march 9 miles down the river to fight the Hessians. Now the Hessians, of course, were rent-a-cops by England to fight against the Americans. And of course, as you know, Washington did beat them very quickly. Very, very short battle, only about an hour and a half, and Washington has victory number 1. But he then decides he better get out of Dodge because up in Princeton was an overwhelming enemy force, so he comes back across the river. Now it's interesting, in this battle down in Trenton, a lot of historians will tell you that very few Americans, if any, died in the Battle of Trenton. Now on the trip down to Trenton, 2 of the guys were so exhausted, they fell out of ranks, fell asleep on the banks, and froze to death. Now it's interesting, on the trip back from Trenton across the river to Pennsylvania, we read that maybe 2 of the guys fell off the boats because maybe they had too much of the rum which they captured, the Hessian rum down in Trenton. Washington finally put a stop to that. But what they're using now are 4 of the Durham boats. The Durham boats with the, they were cargo boats carrying stuff from Easton down to Philadelphia. Now these boats are very heavy. They weigh about 4,600 pounds. They're 8 feet wide. They're 4.5 feet deep. It's not very easy to get these things across the river. They were not designed to go across the river. Now the boats they'll go across depending upon how many reenactors sign up. And the reenactors will sign up based upon what they'd like to do, and are they properly clothed? Do they have the proper uniform, and what have you? Of course, after the Battle of Trenton, Washington comes back here. He then goes back down, and he wins the Second Battle of Trenton, and then he goes into Princeton. Now, one thing that's very interesting, the enlistment by most of Washington's army was up at the end of the year. And just prior to the Second Battle of Trenton, or just after, a lot of these guys say, George, we're out of here. See you later. Good luck. Washington pleads them to stay. He said, by the way, I'll give you $10 hard cash if you'll stay another 6 weeks. He gets a bunch of guys to hang in there. Problem, Washington doesn't have any money. So Washington goes to his buddy, Robert Morris, the financier of the American Revolution, and he says, hey, buddy, Roll, I need some bread real quick. And the next morning, the story goes that Robert Morris shows up with a sack full of $50,000. So Robert Morris was a key factor in keeping the army together, which allowed them to go to Princeton and, of course, win the Battle of Princeton. But what you're watching here today is a reenactment that started in 1953. Do any of you, are you old enough to remember the name St. John Terrell? St. John Terrell? Show of hands. Not too many. St. John Terrell was the guy who decided that it would be a good idea to reenact the crossing of the Delaware. He had addressed a women's club, said, I think I'm going to do it. His wife said, okay, Mouth, you put it in there. You got to figure out how to do it. In his own pocket, he's paid $800 to have a boat made. And on December the 20th, they tested it. And on December 25th, 1953, he and about 6 or 7 other guys, including Jack Kelly, who was Grace Kelly's brother, went across the river for the first reenactment of the crossing. He portrayed Washington for about 25 years. Jack Kelly did it for another 8. The current General Washington has been doing this since 2009. And he fits the part. Mount Vernon will tell you that Washington was a big dude, about 6'2.5". The current General Washington is about that, maybe a little bit taller. But General Washington, the guy who portrays him, very dedicated, very motivated, makes a very good General Washington to lead the troops across the river. You know, it's interesting, as you study history, there's a book that was written about the men who lost America. And the British made some serious miscalculations. And one miscalculation was that they did not believe that the Americans would fight so hard for their liberty. They miscalculated that. Of course, that was to our favor. And it all worked out very, very well. But it's interesting. After the battles of Trenton, and then Princeton, the journals written by both the Hessians and the British realized they were in trouble. They were in for deep doo-doo. They were not going to be able to probably win this war. And of course, it took 5-6 more years before it eventually happened. But it was their perseverance that won the day. And it's interesting because as Cornwallis surrendered to troops which ostensibly ended the war in Yorktown in October of '81, he concedes by telling Washington that fame will gather his greatest laurels from the banks of the Delaware, not the banks of the Chesapeake. So ladies and gentlemen, you are on very, very hallowed grounds. We are very glad you came and supported the park. It's been a great day for America. Let's keep it up. And look, three more cheers for General Washington. Hip, hip, hooray! Hip, hip, hooray! Hip, hip, hooray!
Was there a sign? My toes are looking. See the boots there?
Huzzah. The flag is amazing.
Did you get stuck with good video? Still doing it. Awesome. So he's stuffing up the stuff. He's stuffing in the. They're gonna say fire.
Yeah, but I think when they because they do want December. So I guess that they have more stuff. That was the cost.
My God. I almost dropped my phone.
That'll tell him.
He's shooting it again. I almost dropped my phone.
Excuse me. Oh, there answers my question right there. Did they have Yep. Yeah. Actually,
We're right behind you. We're going to be here for a while. Oh, sorry. We'll be right behind you. Nope.
Are you? Got this.
You probably didn't see
Yeah, Rose is probably Rose is coming back right now. Right, I think this
What? Yeah.
Thank you. I just did Petey's. Oh, I actually just got it done. No. And Steve's not even out, which is surprising. It would have been a nice day for it.
Got a sword.
Yep. And Frank's French.
Oh yeah, he's a stud.
As healthy as he's ever been. Kyle. Winded from all that posing.
They have to. Yeah.
Frank and Tim. Is he doing a piece? Frank.
final stretch as of now, which is.
I'm sure you're depressed.
Oh, like mostly depressed. It's no. We don't talk about it. Please don't bring it up again. Yeah. Acknowledge it. Well, I'm enjoying my youth. Oh, nickel pose. Nick. Strike a pose. Strike a pose.
I don't know what that was. I think I just pulled my hamstring.
My phone is, I'm literally not 2008. 16-year-old old man. Hey, Mr. Dad.
You know, welcome to the club. Welcome to the club. I'll see you guys.
We got a surplus. This is a rehearsal. You made the sacrifice.
No one knows this video is that long.
Yeah, because Mom was there.
You want to waste all your stories from this thing.
Now I feel like my kid and I think there's
Ready to shoot it off. Wait till you shoot it off.
I'm saying over 16 caliber. Technology caught up with war when back in finished. But these things,
Yeah, he put it in something this morning. I'm like, really? You're starting already?
Happy New Year! Come
I can't.